Hi, I'm Martin Reeves. I'm the chairman of the BCG Henderson Institute, and welcome to these series of talks we're doing on beauty and business. We're going to try and get behind the sort of technocratic questions about global warming and our major common problems by investigating the human element through 7 questions. And to do that, I'm very pleased to be joined by Matthias Steger, who is a veteran of the pharmaceuticals industry. We discovered we know a lot of people in common. And right now, you're CEO and co-founder of 2 very interesting biotech companies. One of them, which is called Endogena, did I pronounce that correctly? And the other one, Rejuveron, which are very unusual companies because you're interested in longevity medicine and regenerative medicine, if that's right.
That's correct, and thank you for the invitation and looking forward to the discussion. So Endogena Therapeutics and Rejuveron, both companies really working at the forefront of science, and trying to explore new grounds for high unmet medical needs, amongst, last but not least, also trying to tackle humanity's oldest problem, aging.
So we're at a very special conference, the House of Beautiful Business. I think you're probably not here by accident. So what personal aspiration or interest brings you to this very special conference?
Yes, absolutely. I was really looking forward to come here because what we do every day is really to try to explore new grounds, to walk unbeaten paths, because that is what is needed to discover new drugs where there are no treatments, right? Treatment options, and especially broad fields. So I'm here to really find new inspiration, also sources for creativity, how to approach things in a different way, how to look at what we sometimes believe is a given from a different point of view, a different angle that allows us to then see new paths and open new doors to new scientific fields.
So humanity right now is facing some major existential common problems, global warming being discussed in Glasgow next week, and species depletion and extreme inequality and so on. If I look at the scientific evidence on CO2 emissions, for all of our purpose statements and net zero pledges, the line hasn't deflected at all as far as I can see. What's missing from that picture, do you think? Why, with so much effort and so much concern, are we making so little progress?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. And for me as a scientist, that is, of course, a bit shocking, because the data is evident. I think it's about the communication. It's about getting people curious, interested in the field in order to support it. That's what I see also as a CEO in my company. I need to tickle the curiosity of people to make them go into this novel paths that I alluded to before, and I think that is what is missing at the moment. It's this communication about showing up new ways how to approach these scientifically well-founded challenges.
Well, which aspect of communication do you think is missing? Because we're certainly discussing it a lot. We're hearing about it a lot. So it's not unfamiliarity with the issue, but that engagement is stopping short of urgency and sufficient action. What precisely is missing, do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely right, because at some point, and I stay with that metaphor, I mean, you need to open that door, and I think, and take action. And I think that is what is missing at the moment, to open these new doors and then go along in this new room and follow the path to solutions.
So all practicality aside, if you became godlike and you could add one ingredient to the current situation to create that greater urgency, what one ingredient would you add to the situation?
I would really ask, for people to stay curious, and and to believe in science. And I think, we have a very good case at the moment in front of us, which is COVID, right? I mean, we have demonstrated that we can basically, with science, we can tackle these problems. And so, we should basically follow up on that and use this as an example how we can solve problems if we also work together. It was also a very good example how industry and governments were working together to create solutions. I think that is what is needed also for climate change.
Yes, so I guess COVID is messy, but we we got the vaccines in record time and we made some progress. Why didn't that happen for global warming? Is it just that it's harder to feel urgency for slow problems?
I think that is something that is because the problem is more complex also than a virus that you can get vaccinated and is very targeted, you know. It's already embedded in the name. It's global warming, right? So, I mean, it's not a very targeted thing. So, but important is to start somewhere, you know, and I think we have evidence to start somewhere. And then I have to say, like with COVID, you know, we all have now a green pass. So already in the name, right, it's called Green Pass. Why not creating a green pass for tackling climate challenge?
Right. So in a sense, you're saying we all need inoculating with curiosity. We need to spread the virus of curiosity, perhaps.
Curiosity and also, I mean, believe in science and execute accordingly. And I mean, coming back to the Green Pass, you could, for example, create the Green Pass for flying. It's used up at some point, you know, and then you cannot fly anymore. Today, I couldn't have boarded the plane to come here. Unfortunately, it did take the plane to Lisbon. I couldn't have boarded the plane without the Green Pass. So you could do the same to have an impact on climate change. This is just one thing. Of course, I know that there are much larger CO2 emissions than also from every individual flying.
So let's come to our core question. We're at the house of beautiful business, beauty and business. Those ideas don't seem to go together very easily. So let me ask you, can business be beautiful, and should it be beautiful, and is it beautiful?
So firstly, can it be beautiful? Absolutely. It is for me. And I tell you why. It is because as long as business has a purpose, which goes above and beyond making money, right? It has a purpose. I mean, in Endogena, we now found a potential cure for blindness, which is a total novelty, right? So far, if you have a disease that makes you go blind, there is absolutely nothing what you can do. But we had to go a totally novel approach. So you really need to be curious and purposeful, and that makes business beautiful. Should it be beautiful? Absolutely. Yes, it should be beautiful, because that actually would go back to also help us solve a lot of problems, as I just outlined. This will help us to solve problems with climate change also.
So given that we're not yet making sufficient progress against our major common problems, how could business be more beautiful? Think about the human and the emotional and the purposeful side of business. How could it be even more so?
It's about meaningfulness and impact. That's what's making business beautiful, you know. If you see that you can have an impact with a purpose, that is making business beautiful.
So earlier we were sort of discussing that slow and complex problems are the hardest, because you can't necessarily see in the next second the consequences of your actions. I guess one human way into thinking about the long term is to think about our children and the next generation. I think you have two daughters. We were chatting beforehand. What sort of world do you want them to inherit, and how do you want them to view their dad's role in bringing that world about?
So, I mean, that is a general approach that I think, you know, having children obviously makes me aware that we are only guests in this planet, right? And we better leave it behind as we found it, or even, what is my ambition, a better place, right? So I really hope that we can solve this problem with climate change, but also with my other company, we are tackling aging, you know? And so at the moment, we're getting older, but not necessarily healthier, right? So how can we expand health span? I mean, you know, my parents, you know, going to the other end, they are getting very old, but I mean, it's for them, it is very hard, you know, at the moment. So how can we expand health span rather than lifespan? I think that's a big ambition that I would like to solve for them, you know. Also because, again, not only just for the well-being, but also for the economic burden that we have, you know, obviously with this rising population of people that get older but not healthier.
So when I think about the complexity of problems like global warming, I think you're exactly right. It's a very complex problem. It's complex because it's interdependent. In business, we often take a problem, we split it into small pieces, we solve the pieces, and we assume that we solve the problem. But if I make my car out of aluminium, I maybe reduce my own emissions, but I may increase the energy intensity of the metal that's used to make my car. I may cause a problem somewhere else. So it's a collective problem. We don't have a global government. I don't know any company that measures the total carbon footprint of its ecosystem. How do we, as businesses, get at the collective business problem?
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, I mean, there I go back to science, and it's very comparable to what we try with aging. It's very comparable, actually, because these are all complex processes, which have a lot of interdependencies, such as one example is sarcopenia, muscle wasting, and osteoporosis. So you really need to have a holistic view on the thing, but at the same time, you need to break it down to make it sustainable. And I really, we have to do more in educating people how to make it sustainable and how to work on that. But at the same time, I come back to the green path for climate change. Companies should have a green path. That is their exhaustion they can have per maximum of year, and that's what they need to achieve.
So I wonder whether there's some learning from presumably your work on gene networks and metabolic networks, because I remember there was this huge euphoria when we sequenced the human genome, and then this huge disappointment when we discovered that it wasn't that simple. You could know the genome and understand nothing about how gene networks work, but we're beginning to figure that out, right? So in a sense, we're looking at the collective gene network. What mental discipline, what way of looking at the problem may be transferable to our common problems of humanity?
I think three things. So first, it was a bit overwhelming, or it still is. Same with climate change, right? So, I mean, the first thing is that you stand up, you show up, and you want to do something. You want to change the common belief or pattern of thinking that is currently there, which means really you have to maybe take a step back and approach it from a different angle. I think that is very important, but that also helped us a lot. I mean, in the last decade, the research that came out on following up from all these gene patterns, that hallmarks of aging were discovered, stem cell reprogramming was discovered. So we're making great progress now. And then it's another thing to translate this into drugs, but that's something we are working on now.
So my final question comes back to the House of Beautiful Business. This Tim Lebrecht, the founder of the house, has this genius for combining words that don't belong and creating sparks. So we have beautiful and business. On the wall outside this room, we have concrete love. Again, two words that don't go together. If you look at the language of business, it doesn't use the whole English language. We don't use the word love very often in annual reports. We don't use the word beautiful very often in investor conferences. If you could add one word that should be in the business vocabulary but isn't, what would that word be, and what would be the consequence of using that word more?
Yes, here I have a very good, very concrete suggestion, actually. And going back to my children, it's actually something I learned from my children, It's like, and I refer this to having a beginner's mindset, because we always are a bit afraid of, I shouldn't be a beginner, I should be an expert. But no, actually, of course, you should be an expert in the field, because based on that, you can make then according decisions and discover new ground. But being an expert doesn't mean you should lose your beginner's mindset and children's eyes, actually, to look at things as if you would look at it the first time, because that will allow us to look at it also in a different way. So I think that will have an impact on how we conduct business, all a bit more modest.
And how would you encapsulate that in a word then? Would the word be curiosity or beginner's mindset, or what would the word be?
It would be curiosity, yeah.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
And if we use the word curiosity more in business, what would be the consequence of that? What good thing would happen, do you think?
If we would be using that word more, I don't think much would change. But if we would change our mind to be more curious, then a lot of things could change, because then we are not set into boundaries and we can think about beyond these boundaries. And it's not about always the next quarterly result, because the beginner's mindset actually allows you to also think about in a more sustainable, holistic way and also more long-term way.
So I've talked about a lot of, I guess you could say, humanistic or attitudinal ideas today. I'm guessing that you practice what you preach. You probably try to encapsulate some of this in your daily behavior as a CEO. How do you action these sentiments we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, within my two companies, I mean, these are values that we rolled out and that we live. We have built a culture within the company that really follows that, because for us, this is business critical. I mean, if we cannot make a huge giant step forward into the unknown, jump into the cold water, we will never discover drugs for unmet medical needs.
So give me an example of a practice. You walk into a room and you do something that you think that other companies don't do very much, which captures these things we've talked about. What would be an example of a practice that encapsulates some of the things we've talked about?
We are highly collaborating. So we are collaborating with leaders in the field. And so we really take a collaborative approach, which I think is also needed to make these changes. It also goes back to the beginner's mindset. That's what we practice, right, in our company, is that they are all great scientists, right, that I hire in my company, obviously. But I always tell them that to be modest and be aware that, okay, you are a genius, but there are other people like that out there as well. Don't think you're the first person who thinks about that, but make sure that you work with these people, that collaboratively we can move forward. I think that's one thing we definitely do in our companies. Yeah.
Well, we probably have to wrap it up there, but it's been fascinating. I think we've essentially created a little thread about curiosity and beginner's mindset and modesty and reciprocity that is very interesting. So thank you very much, Matthias.
Thank you, Martin.